Oliver that I am also going to read. But it's so good that you have to listen to it, right? So I have a PowerPoint, and I think, but it's not critical, I can't do this, so we're gonna try it anyway.
That's it. Come on.
Who was that? Okay.
Isn't that the flip? I don't know if I can flip it, but it's videoing. Is that the flip there?
Oh, there we go, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Well, good morning. First, I am grateful to having been asked to come here. I've never spoken in this kind of setting before, so but I thought I would be happy to broaden my horizons, and Irene assured me that this was a friendly group, which I can see already, so I'm not as nervous as I would be otherwise. I said that I would talk a little bit about my own connection to trees myself, because, and just to be introduced biologically as a biology professor, because I always liked plants from the time I was little, but I really didn't know anything about trees. And then I was hired in 1992 to work at Georgian Court University, where I still am. And it turns out that they have an arboretum, which is a collection of woody plants for which you have records. And our records are in a low-tech database that's Excel. It's kind of interesting that I'm here because the woman who started the arboretum, Mary Stockton, used to live a mile or two down the road in Maxim Road here. So here I am. And she would be, if she were still here, but she's in Florida, I'm sure she would be here today too. So when I was asked, Irene suggested the topic of spirituality of trees, and I thought, well, okay, I think I know what spirituality is, but I really should look it up because there are so many definitions to everything. So I decided that I wanted to keep my vision of the definition simple as being a connection to something greater than ourselves. And to me, as I was putting this together, it was, I was thinking about the connection of trees to something greater than themselves, but also us as humans to trees, because of course they're greater than us in some ways. So I'm not a big believer in, like, I won't say superstition, but I was at an art exhibit that a Sister of Mercy has in our art gallery a few weeks ago, and in her book that she presented to people who wanted to take a copy, there was a quote from Thoreau, and because it had trees in it, I thought, well, this is just meant to be read today, so I put it in at the very beginning. Alone in distant woods or fields, I come to myself, I once more feel myself grandly related. It is as if I always met in these places some grand, serene, immortal, infinitely encouraging, though invisible companion, and walked with him. And so I thought that was particularly fitting since it's talking about something bigger than Thoreau, and he is in a wooded setting. So you can kind of think about how that might relate to you. And I have Mary Oliver, in the spirit of lifelong learning, I only taught biology classes until I was 57, I'm 63 now, and I decided I would expand my horizons and teach a general education class. And in that class, I was introduced to Mary Oliver, and I'm sad to say she had been escaping me for 57 years. Now I'm one of her biggest fans. If you don't know Mary Oliver, she died a few years ago, and but she writes, she's very prolific, and she has wonderful poems, including a lot that are nature related. So I wanted to read two other ones, The Trees, and so I'll read that one first. Do you think of them as decoration? Think again. Here are maples flashing, and there's on the left is a maple flashing, so it's my little prop there. And here are the oaks, holding on all winter to their dry leaves. So on the right is an oak, and we have one out in the back which still has a couple out there with their dry leaves. And here are the pines that will never fail. There are pines. Until death, the instruction to be green. And here are the willows, the first to pronounce a new year. I don't have a willow slide, sorry. May I invite you to revise your thoughts about them? O Lord, how we are all for invention and advancement. But I think it would do us good if we would think about these brothers and sisters quietly and deeply. The trees, just holding on to the old holy ways. And so for me, the reason I wanted to put this in is she is talking about trees responding all the time to doing the same thing year after year, in some way knowing what to do because of their connection to what's around them. And she's asking us to, focus ourselves on the traditional ways of doing things and what we probably inherently know as true, and not always thinking about something new. And the second one, a poem of trees by Mary Oliver. Can you imagine, for example, what the trees do, not only in lightning storms, or the watery dark of a summer's night, or under the white nets of winter? And I just wanted to show the white nets of winter, because last year we didn't have any white nets of winter, but and those are just grandiose pictures of trees. Those are all from Georgian Court, by the way. If you haven't come to our campus to visit, please do. Whenever we're not looking. Surely you can't imagine they don't dance from the root up, wishing to travel a little, not cramped so much as wanting a better view, or more sun, or just as avidly more shade. Surely you can't imagine that they just stand there, loving every minute of it. The birds, hawk, or the emptiness, the dark rings of the years, slowly and without a sound, thickening, and nothing different unless the wind, and then only in its mood, comes to visit. Surely you can't imagine patience and happiness like that. And for patience, I wanted to put in a picture of an oak seedling. I don't know if anyone has ever grown an oak from an acorn, but they don't grow any more than that the first year. And to me, that is the amazing patience of a tree, because other trees will grow a lot. In fact, Cheryl was telling me about her tree in the front yard, and some of them in the first year will grow 1 or 2 or 3 feet. This one is like 6 inches if you're lucky, and it's very patient. It just, I put up my leaves in May, and I'm not doing anything else this year. Sorry, I'm just waiting for next year. So I just feel that like the connection to trees and how they're different, and in this poem, she is, asking us to think about them more than just what you see when you look at them, but aren't they really trying to reach more sun or more shade, or don't they want to get out and dance around? So that helped me, and Mary Oliver in general has helped me focus a little bit on our connection to trees. So one of the things that, as a biologist, I realized when I started teaching biology that I hadn't really thought about before is all living things have to solve the same problems. We all have different ways of solving problems. So we're used to thinking of what humans do to solve problems. What do we do to get food? How do we reproduce? How do we fight off infections? And trees, even though they're very different from us, have to solve the same problems. They have their own immune systems. They have their own ways of getting food. They have their own ways of reproducing. So I like to think about our connection to them and how interdependent we are with them, and to realize that as other living things, they have to solve the same problems that we do. So we're not as different as we might think we are. We all are trying to do things, but in our own way. So thinking about the parts of trees and the other part of connection, which is how the trees are connected to something bigger, unlike us, and we are walking around in this room, but we know our feet don't go into the earth, and we're kind of stuck at this height. The trees, of course, have their roots, which are connected deeply to the earth and are growing towards the center all the time. And they're going deeper and deeper and deeper into that part of our universe, whereas on the other end, we have the shoots, the stems and the leaves, and they are going in the opposite direction, into the air and the sky and trying to reach the heavens. And the tree is making these connections all the time, deeper and deeper every year, to the rest, really, of the universe. And then what do each of those tree parts do? Well, the trunk and the roots are transporting the water, which we have seen in great abundance today, coming from the sky and washing into the soil and then being taken up by the roots, along with all of the elements that are in the soil for the plant to make food, and then being carried up to the leaves where the food is actually being made using the sun and the air, parts of the air that are coming into the plant. So we're used to having our food sit over there, for example, and we just take it with our hand and stick it in our mouth, and these plants have a deeper connection to the rest of their universe because of the way that they have to get their nourishment. Another aspect of their connection to the universe is gravity and how they do what they do. So remember that, of course, plants don't have eyes and they don't have the senses that we have, but they know where gravity is. And so the root, without any eyes, knows to grow downward. It has its own sense particles inside it, and the shoot grows in the other direction, the same way. It knows that gravity is in that direction, and the light is up there, and I have to go up that way. So again, we're not aware of that as humans because we don't have to think about those things, but the plant, which has no ears or eyes, is sensing those things without those same senses. The other aspect that we have only recently learned as scientists is the role of chemicals in communication. So we've been talking as our means of communication, and of course plants don't have voices. And what scientists have realized, and the reason it took so long to realize this, is because we are so used to using our five senses and relying so much on sight and hearing and touch that we don't really think about chemicals very much. You're all emitting chemicals in this room, but we can't really smell them, so we're not cognizant of that. And trees also don't have a nose, but chemicals are around us all the time, and we are responding to them even though we don't realize it. And for trees, the things that we know now that they are responding to, for example, in the roots, are they can tell whether the plant next to them is related to them or not, and is of the same species, by the chemicals that it's releasing and that they're taking in. So all these things are happening outside right now, even though we look at the trees and we think they're just there, but they're really not. They're doing all this interaction and having all these connections with the universe that we're not really aware of. And then the other thing that I did want to talk about, and you're probably wondering why is that in there? Okay, there is a little light near the bottom of that slide, and one of the things that we teach about in biology is that plants, again, they don't have eyes, but they have photosensors, of course, and they can tell when there is a light near them. So I put this in because this time of year I'm especially attuned to this, where the top of the tree, this happens to be an oak, is naked of leaves, but the bottom branch, because it is next to a light that is on a lot, still thinks it is summer-ish. Not quite summer, but not quite winter. And so it's kept its leaves longer. And as humans, because of everything else we know it's winter whether there's a light on or not, but that part of the plant doesn't know that. And so when I walk around, as a biologist, and I'm grateful for being a biologist because those are the things I think about And I try to say, why is this way and why is that way? Why does this tree have leaves? Why doesn't that one? And those are the kinds of things that stick with me. The other thing that that occurred to me when I started teaching is this connection between us and plants, because we do chemically exactly the opposite that plants do, but we are dependent on plants to do what we do for food. So I color-coded this just like if I was teaching biology, because it's easier. So trees are taking in carbon dioxide from the air and water, and they use light energy to make carbohydrates, and they emit oxygen as a waste product. And for us as humans, we think, well, that's kind of interesting that it's a waste product for them, but it really is, because we know we can't live without oxygen. So where does our oxygen come from? And I think you probably know this, but as humans, we take in oxygen. A lot of it comes from plants, and we break down carbohydrates, and then, in fact, I know on that table over there are plant products, like the apple cider that I can see, that are carbohydrates, and the plant made those. And we are making them, changing them into water in our bodies and chemical energy, and we emit carbon dioxide as a waste product, which we all know that we do. And then, of course, there's a cycle here. So where do the plants get the carbon dioxide? To make their own food, they get it from humans. And so one of the things I kind of like to do is to remind ourselves, especially because of how long trees have lived. Sorry, that's okay, don't worry about it. I have a little prop. So you can, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens to these. You can throw them out or recycle them or put them back in the earth or whatever you want to do with them. I'm just going to maybe pass these around. You could just take one or two. I get carried away when I do things like this, so probably have enough for like 50 people. But so this is a leaf from a white oak tree on our campus, and I chose this tree because it dates back at least to the year 1750. Wow. And I know this because I'm a tree person, and it lost big branches all the way back in 2000, and yes, I do remember the year, and I climbed up on a ladder and counted the tree rings, and that's how I know how old it was. So the reason that I asked you to take that leaf for a moment and think about it is this process of photosynthesis has been going on, of course, with that tree for as long as it's been alive. So that the tree itself in its body is as big as it is because in its trunk it has food in it that it made in 1750. Now, what is in that trunk? Well, there are atoms, carbon atoms, from the Lenape people that were walking around. There are colonial settlers, people we don't know, previous generations, and they're all in that tree. And in that leaf, which was made this year, some of the atoms and the food in that leaf, the carbohydrates that make up that leaf, came from all of the different people that were close to that tree in the last year. And so it was students, it was faculty, it was visitors. And so when you're touching the leaf, you have a connection with all those people because that food, that leaf represents basically, or is stored in that leaf, is from all of those people themselves and all of us. And probably part of me is in there because I walk by the tree too. So I just like to think about that as a way that every tree has in it parts of the rest of all of us that have been around the tree. So the trees around you in this setting have parts of you in their bodies because you've been breathing out the carbon dioxide. So it's just kind of an interesting thing, I think. And the other thing that I want to mention is kind of obvious, but of course, what kinds of things are in all these trees? So that tree in particular, because it's an oak and it's hollow because it's been struck by lightning, it has, of course, squirrels in it, many different kinds of birds. We have bald eagles on our campus, sometimes they're in the neighborhood of that tree. And then there's 3 things here that you probably can't see very well. The one in the middle with the big eyes is something called a click beetle, which I've only ever seen once on that tree, but I happened to be there when I had a camera, and so I took a picture of it. And then on the left, that little green dot is actually a living thing. It is an insect larva that camouflages itself by taking pieces of lichens and moss from its surroundings, the tree, and putting them on its back so that it looks like it's part of the tree, but it's not. And then on the right, because this tree is so old, it has termites, but it's still alive. So I mean, we don't treat the tree for its termites because it's okay. Now this is kind of on the left is a cicada, and that's just a natural picture of one. If you've never seen them when they first come out of their shell, that is their skeleton. That's what they look like. And on the right, this is from that very same tree. This one year, I was just looking around, and I noticed on the underside of one of the trunks this procession of skeletons from cicadas. And so I still don't know the answer to this, but I just am like, why did they do this? Why did they pick this tree? What is their connection to each other that they, and what's the purpose of lining up like that? Because you don't usually see them. If you're used to looking at cicadas, to see that many in a row is like really weird. So I just, it's still a mystery, but it's interesting. And of course, a tree that old has fungi living at the base, so there's a fungus that's living off of the tree that it has connections to. And then on the left is mistletoe. Now there's no mistletoe in that tree, but I couldn't avoid the mistletoe picture. And again, I was in Washington for a little mini vacation 2 weeks ago, and I walked by a tree. It's a little too cold here for usually mistletoe, and there was one in a tree, and I said, I'm giving this talk in 2 weeks, and I meant to put in a picture of the mistletoe because it's a plant living off of another plant. And then on the right is one of my favorite plants, and yes, it is a plant, and it's totally white. And it is called, the common name is Indian pipe. We don't like to use names like that anymore but in biology, but that's the common name, and it is actually a flowering plant. Why is it totally white? That's a picture of its flowers. It is white because it has no chlorophyll, and it gets its food from fungi that are getting their food from what is coming out of plant roots. So it's this whole cycle of everything being connected. And even a plant, a tree that is basically just sitting there is still connected to everything else. One of the other things, the very last thing I wanted to mention in this PowerPoint is because Irene said I might mention one of my favorite trees, and I thought, okay, well, I should at least do that. Well, I like a lot of trees, but white oaks including. But I have so many favorite trees. But one of the trees that I think I admire the most is the pitch pine, which we have a lot of in this part of New Jersey. One of the reasons I admire it is this is right after a fire in Warren Grove. And if you can't see the label there, I'll just move this up. Which is not that far from here, May 2007, and it looks like the whole tree has been incinerated. However, pitch pines have this very special ability. If I can get the slide to advance, they have a special ability. Let's see. Can I do that? Okay, there we go. They can re-sprout from underneath the burned bark, as long as they're not totally incinerated. And so this is a sort of a resurrection, if you will, because you think the tree is totally dead and it grows back. And then in a few years, it makes a trunk that I like to call them fuzzy trunks on the right, where everything else around it is still brown and recovering, and the pitch pine is there with its new growth coming off the top. So that was mostly what I wanted to say, but my very last poem was the one that was already read, but that I have to read again, Bart that Elaine read. So now after you heard whatever I have to say, maybe this will say the same thing to you or not. When I Am Among the Trees by Mary Oliver. When I'm among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches, and they call again. It's simple, they say, and you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. And so I think that's probably a good ending, and I thank you for being a good audience, and I think that's it. So,